Three, two, one, hack. Welcome to the Ready Room Podcast, Cowboy Time, presented by Authentic Media. It's episode 6 on Friday, 8 August. I am in your lead today, Brendan Lenny Walsh. I will try to be faster and funnier than last time in episode 3. My first Wingman Dash 2 is Gravy. He's bringing his lethally accurate analysis. As always, Gravy, how you doing today?
Excellent. Sunny side up.
Excellent. All right. And then Dash 3, Boyle, Dash last. Hanging on by the stabs, but he's bringing that PhD level credibility. Boyle, how are you doing this evening?
Doing fantastic. Fingernails dug into the stabs, my friend.
Awesome. And then base, Rob, we have the air spare Phil today. All right, so thanks for jumping on that, and we'll look forward to hearing any chat or comments you have as well. All right, for the comm plan, primary, you can reach us on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify, and then aux, you can find us on YouTube, that's at Authentic Media, or on X at Ready Room Cowboy Time if you'd like to chat us there. All right, moving into the product review, moving right along with the card, it's time for the question of the day. Boyle, I gave you a tough one today. Can you go ahead with it?
I can. This was an interesting topic. What is the Ghauri or Hada 5? And knew nothing about what that was. And as I started doing research, found out it is a Pakistani surface-to-surface medium-range ballistic missile designed to carry a nuclear warhead. The payload it can carry is up to about 1,500 pounds. And just as an aside, I hate it when everything is done in the metric system, because here in America, we use feet and pounds. And when intel officers are like, yeah, this missile can go 50 kilometers. I'm like, that's awesome. There's nothing in the cockpit that is in metrics, man. Like, break it down nautical miles. So this missile, back into the question of the day, this missile can travel anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 kilometers for our international listeners. And for red-blooded Americans, that is about 900 to about 980 miles or so. The warhead that it can carry is up to 700 kilograms or 1,500 pounds, and it's anywhere between specifically designed between a 12 kiloton to 35 kiloton nuclear warhead. And that's kind of the yield of explosive. It is kind of an older school medium-range ballistic missile, mainly because of the short range, and it is a liquid-fueled rocket. So not a solid rocket motor like most of them are today. It was initially designed in the 90s, a knockoff from my favorite missile, the No Dong missile from North Korea, and then taken over by the Pakistanis, and they made some modifications to it, which is why you kind of get the range difference, 1,200 to 1,500 kilometers, different variants of that. And then now anywhere, if you look online, just unclassified, anywhere between 2,000 meter CEP, which is not that good, although how close do you really need to be with a nuclear weapon, all the way down to 190 meter CEP, so much better for a long range guidance. And then there's rumor that there is Chinese GPS inside of it, some Chinese guidance that's been put in it now. What makes it unique is that it's designed for its really as a strategic asset, as a threat deterrence for its neighbor India. And it is mobile. It travels around on a Scud B TEL made by the Russians. But because, although it is mobile and designed to be, a hard to target system, nuclear deterrence, hard to target, but it's got to stop, fill up with the liquid rocket fuel, and then launch. So there are some challenges there if it's going to be employed. And that is your question of the day.
Awesome. Wow. That was impressive. I think you nailed it. Last time we were talking a lot about conventional forces, right? And I'm sure our listening audience knows, right? India, Pakistan, 2 of the 9 nuclear powers. I just think it's important to close the loop on how tenuous that dynamic is. We touched on the conventional force impressions. Maybe India is bigger in numbers, Pakistan upping their game. But both of these nations are nuclear powers. And those missiles, you outlined the ones for Pakistan today, or their main long-range one. But India has comparable number of warheads and certainly some missiles that can reach just as far. Those ranges essentially are deep into each other's territory, essentially all over it. So it adds that asymmetric dynamic to the warfare. And so, from what I read on it, both nations subscribe to that no first use policy. But I'm fascinated by this. Like, at what point could a conventional conflict escalate to nuclear? At what point is there an existential threat to the nation? So, at some point, I want my SAW graduate and my PhD friend to sit me down and educate me on the asymmetries of warfare. Gravy, any thoughts?
Yeah, no one knows, man. That's one of the most difficult pieces is the paradigm shift from conventional forces and kind of your standard escalation models and always searching for off ramps, and then you hit a ceiling, and that ceiling is nuclear war, and it's really hard to find off ramps in every engagement that doesn't pierce that bubble, but real strategy is above that line, which is pretty interesting because you know paradigmatically and kind of just how we grow up and how we think as military planners and operators is below that line. And so and that's why people, really started thinking that military forces are strategic. And, a lot of times they're not. Like the Marine Corps is an operational level of war force, right? And
Mhm.
so like that's kind of really hard for planners to get their brain around, but I do enjoy this question. I was gonna say you lost me at Ghauri had a 5, but based on based on the comments and views we got, I'm pretty sure we tried to start some level of strategic engagement in between the two countries with our last podcast. So congratulations on all of that, Boyle, for that selection. You nailed that one, buddy.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, way to go.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to topic one. Gravy, great segue since it was such a hot topic. India versus Pakistan and reattacks on kind of what we've learned. And certainly, I'd like to give a chance to look at some of the audience comments as well. But I'll open with this, and I'm sure you guys will have some similar thoughts. But, our interest here at the Ready Room Cowboy Time, it stems from the military aviation aspects of the conflict. I'm not so ignorant to think that I can sit here and in less than an hour sum up decades of tension, origins of a conflict, tragedies, right? Losses on both sides. But with that said, this was certainly a great topic by Boyle, a historic air battle. And it appears to have multiple firsts, as we discussed last time, the likely shoot downs of Indian aircraft by Pakistani forces, followed up by platform adjustments by India in the later days of the conflict to apparently achieve some strategic objectives. Um, that's our interest here at the podcast. And any thoughts on that before I dive into some comments? Gravy, we'll start with you.
Boy, here we go. Okay. So, yeah, some just basically observations on social contagion, and then also some ideas on analysis and kind of how we look at the world, especially in an unclassified, talking into a can to the potential world forum. So, I've always gone with the idea of this podcast was like, the Joe Rogan philosophy, like never read comments, man. Just like don't do it. But after getting a handful of views, and then this podcast or this episode's got 25,000 views or something like that, which is nothing compared to like some teenage girl jumping on a car, but like that is a lot of views for a bunch of old guys talking into a can. So um, so I like power skimmed like the first 100 and was like, whoa, like wow, I literally don't know anything about military aviation like at all. And and that really kind of brought to mind, you know, how we view things and kind of how we talk about things, especially in the ready room. Like when you show up to the ready room, a lot of times it's just on news of the day. Like you go and you BS with your buddies and you learn things, right? And you just kind of kick around ideas in your head. So it's light analysis, it's fun, it's kind of what we do here. But I do think we at least I demonstrated that I literally don't know squat about this engagement, like at all. Apparently, I'm like, less than 0.5% into understanding what in the world went down. And that brought up kind of my point on analysis, which is, we'll go fly like in a flag or a WTI or an edge or like whatever weapon school event with hundreds of airplanes in the sky. We will spend 8 hours in excruciating analysis, detailed down to 1,000th of a second to determine what in the world happened. And then we'll go off into another room and just like sand each other's faces on, who did what, why, what was the root cause of the mistake. And then like everyone comes out of there, even if you won, you walked out of that thinking like, wow, that was the worst flight of my whole entire life. I'm the worst aviator on the planet, except, maybe Lenny, right? Like there's probably one guy worse than me, right? I mean, it's probably dash 2 or 4, right? Or whoever the if the mag CO was in the flight with you, it's probably him, right? So like that was always kind of like the idea. And so, read a few things on the internet, talk to a chat GPT to try to figure out what happens. We watch a Pakistani video, you watch an Indian video, and you just try to draw some general conclusions in, an hour or so of prep time. And that's kind of where we are, right? Because I don't think the guys in the flight probably fully understand what happened and they probably haven't even grasped all the lessons learned in that engagement. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can shoot on the target all you want. A lot of armchair quarterbacks out there like us. So that's kind of where I am on it. And so I really didn't do any more research on it. I kind of tried to watch a few more videos, but I didn't learn anything new because this is all unclassified, man. Like this is what we got. So I thought, Boyle, I thought you like talked about it perfectly. Lenny, you too, just kind of a loose, fair analysis of both sides. And I, of course, I'm sitting here in my American house in Northern Virginia, and I'm like, I thought it was a very fair representation, but that dude, that's me, right? Other than just learning the lesson of like, I really, again, low SA to the merge, gear down, flaps down, full AB, going into an engagement, right? Winchester. So like that's basically, I think, what I learned, which is basically nothing. There you go. Next question.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that was a lot of time for nothing and an insult at me. I appreciate that. Boyle, any thoughts before I take us to our sucker hole segment? And I'll define that in a second.
My gosh, here we go.
Just a couple of quick points. First, just for the viewers and the listeners, episode 7, we will be jumping on cars, like teenagers, and trying to get our viewership up. So we're not above that. We're not. Yeah, happy to do that if that's what it's going to take. Second, I think, Lenny, to your point, far be it from us to, here we're going to look at the tactical aspects, trying to draw out military lessons learned, completely agnostic to the political pieces. But, our question of the day goes to some of the deep-rooted tensions that are there just by the naming of the missiles. The Ghauri missile was in response to the Preethi missile that the Indians had made. Preethi was a 12th century general from the Indian subcontinent who was very successful, and the Ghauri was named after Sultan Muhammad Ghauri, a 12th century ruler who defeated Preethi in battle. And so, centuries old touch points are things that we don't understand. I certainly don't understand that, until looking at the question of the day and just asking the question, like, why did they name it this? And then you start peeling back these many bits of cultural layers, that are so rich and deep on both sides. Far be it from us to be able to try and to grapple those things, in one segment of our podcast. But I think that there are, and Lenny, you're going to take us now, lead back over to you. I think you're going to take us through what are some military lessons learned that we can take from this conflict.
Well, hopefully we'll get there. And I'll define this next segment. First time we're doing this segment on the show. It's called the sucker hole. As we all know in the ready room, the sucker hole is that clear piece of sky on that otherwise abysmal weather day. And no one's flying. You look out there and somebody's like, I can go flying, right? And so you hope that when you get out there, it's clear on top and it's clear in a million, and it adds some clarity to the otherwise terrible weather day. And so I'll do that with social media here. Hopefully we will get some clarity as we go through the sucker hole. All right. By the way, when I was looking through all these comments, I know Gravy said you're not a comment reader. This gave me flashbacks to going through some of my command climate surveys. So if you know, you know. And there, of course, there were a lot of comments saying we need to do better, some disparaging comments in there. But again, like you said, we've got conflicting reports, maybe media that's favorable to both sides, unclassified environment, right? That's all we're able to look at. So I'll pick out one of the comments. These are off of YouTube. Obviously, you can scroll down. I won't put any users on the spot here, but quote, you are giving less credit to the Pakistani Air Force than it's due them. The data link 17, is an indigenous creation, and this link is what held everything together for various platforms. And quote, goes on to say that the Indian Air Force, and he alludes to this, that it was grounded for a full 48 hours after the initial battle. There are multiple other comments that suggest that the Indian Air Force was essentially grounded after the reported losses there on the first day. So there are multiple other comments that allude to the background and training of the Pakistani Air Force, its proficiency in F-16s, Western tactics, We are all encouraged in multiple comments to read Chuck Yeager's autobiography. So I'll have to check that one out,
Great book.
given his time.
Great
Yeah,
book.
Pakistani advisor out there. I do have his autograph, by the way. When I was a little kid, I wrote to him and
Nice.
told him I wanted to be a pilot. And, a couple months later, I get a letter back with an autographed picture of him and stuff. So pretty cool. I will have to, my reading on him is probably a little bit stale, though. I'll need to get back into it.
What did he say in the letter? Like, this is as close as you're going to get, kid? Or what?
Yeah, give up now.
You're welcome. No, no, I know, just very gracious, like encouraging my interest in
Good.
piloting, and then autograph picture, which was awesome. So obviously a legend there, and he speaks to them highly in the book apparently. So we'll have to take a look at that. There are also multiple comments on the number of aircraft losses and how that might not reflect the overall outcome of the conflict. Just because some aircraft were shot down, does that mean one country's strategic objective was achieved or not? And then we also get into some comments here. Quote, it's funny on how no one is talking about how the Indian Air Force did on the 9th and 10th on the Pakistani soil, but I guess who cares what the ground reality is, unquote. And another quote goes on to say that the Indian Air Force was able to successfully neutralize Pakistani radars at multiple sites, destroyed multiple hangars to include aircraft in them, made craters on airfields, and has more than proved it's a force to reckon with. All right, so those are kind of the wave tops from what I saw. Any changes to your analysis or opinions based on those top level ones? Gravy, we'll start with you.
Well, other than just the new information, considering it's quality information, it's interesting. But like we know, you can win a dogfight, you can win an air battle, but that doesn't mean you're going to win the campaign, and it doesn't mean you're going to move the needle on strategy. Because why are people in airplanes shooting at each other? Like, why are they there doing that? And as we all know, it's about political will, right? It is military means, it's applying force to attain a political objective. And so I guess you just got to look at, what were the political objectives? And I can't speak about that. So, like I said, uh, that's not really as far as I was willing to go in the research, other than trying to understand the tactical implications. Now, there was some pretty interesting stuff coming out of those comments, when it comes to links and specific tactics and preparation and the support of the Chinese technology with the Pakistanis, as well as like the Indian Air Force and their history and everything that they do as far as preparation and all the multiple different aircraft they fly. So all interesting, all good stuff. However, it still doesn't mean I've been able to draw any definitive conclusions on the success of the air engagement.
Oil, any thoughts?
I would say, since World War One, there's been this great romanticism with air battles and air fights, and it gets maybe undue attention or too much attention is paid to it, vice the other pieces. What are the headlines? India lost X aircraft, and that's kind of it, at least in a lot of the reporting, unless you go really deep or you happen to live there and you're living through this kind of thing and you're seeing the wider picture. And certainly myself, bit off on that aspect just based off of background experience, training, and all those kinds of things. But I think to everybody's point, it is the wider war. Yep, so some aircraft got shot down. Well, what were the strategic objectives of India? What were the objectives of Pakistan as well? Some of the other comments there were a lot of comments, and then a lot of both in the thread and that or on our channel, and then on in reporting about how on the Indian side that they felt like there were too many handcuffs with rules of engagement, that there were different kinds of ROE had they been undone, and that is certainly very interesting. It'd be very interesting to know what specifically it was and what maybe those handcuffs were than just generally. But I think it speaks to a wider point of war will always have some sort of handcuffs on it. There will always be some sort of ROE. Throughout our careers, we've seen all kinds of ROE changes, tightening, lessening. Even when you go to an exercise, it is part of the training and one of the aspects of modern warfare. The other thing, too, I think is interesting is, these are, Lenny, you brought up right at the beginning, these are two nuclear power neighbors with long history between the two of them, but nuclear power was not a deterrent for this very short and sharp but very violent. When you look at the ground strikes that were happening, the amount of damage to ground targets that was happening. The nuclear piece wasn't the deterrent, and just shows is that an indication of things to come around the world between other nuclear powers that are out there, that there could be a quick escalation, a quick clash of violence, and then a quick cooling of tempers after that. I don't know, but I think we do need to bring up the point. There was one person who made a comment that said, "We are doing great, and we need our own YouTube channel." That's the one I really zeroed in on, was that guy.
Yeah. He made a couple comments. Like I said, it's like the survey, man. I read through everything. Just want to see how we're doing, get the debrief out. But
was that one of you under a pseudonym, by the way?
That's right.
Yeah. Was that your dad, Boyle?
Yeah, was that? Was it signed?
Doubtful.
Yeah. Still your harshest critic, right?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's great.
Boyle, to your point, in some of the earliest, as they were wrestling with nuclear exchange with peer competitors, with the U.S. first uncontested, and then as Russia, then the USSR came online with them, and then they, slowly got proliferated across the Western world and into the other places. There was a lot of thinkers out there, and their names escape me right now, but several certainly studies coming out of different groups and think tanks inside the U.S. which predicted exactly that. Is that nuclear exchange in numbers? I've seen estimates as low as 100, nuclear warheads, modern nuclear warheads, and basically the environment on the Earth is unlivable. And that is a fraction of the warheads that the U.S. and the USSR and China and basically everyone has. So it's like those things are so unthinkable that at some level, shorter, more protracted but lower level conventional wars with periods of inflection that kind of rise above that violence line of a military action, people shooting at each other, that those things will continue over time, but we are going to avoid the World War scenario just because of that strategic down pressure from nuclear weapons to keep it into the conventional modes. And certainly a lot of really, really brilliant people have spent a lot of time, thinking and writing about this. And far be it for me to talk about it anymore because I'm way out of my lane. But that's just to say, in general agreement, I think that's a reasonable, thesis there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, obviously we're not going to solve this one today, and we'll look to continue these kind of discussions and see if we learn more and revisit it. I will bring up my favorite comment though. Quote, "I think the dude in the driver's seat should start driving to the grocery store," unquote. So no excuses, message received, and I will up my venue game. I'm back in the home office today. I was not driving. Seatbelt on in case somebody sideswiped me, but I was parked. And I wasn't jumping on the car, but maybe I was in the car. Maybe that's what helped the views there. I don't know.
I did have some old bros reach out, Lenny, and specifically call you out and say, I wonder if he should have taken his seatbelt off. So I made sure I'd give you.
My wife told me that too, but it's like, hey, got to be safe, still on the road environment.
That's right.
Here.
We're all safety officers. Said it last episode. I'll say it again.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's move into our second topic. Also, not a super pleasant topic, but on January 29, 2025, everyone here should be familiar. American Airlines Flight 5342. The U.S. Army Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter collided midair over the Potomac, and all lives on board were lost. Terrible tragedy. Certainly our condolences go out to those affected, but as is often the case in aviation, right? Understanding how this accident happened can potentially provide a multifaceted approach to prevent something similar from happening in the future. As painful as that process and dissecting those lessons learned can be, I know you guys are familiar with that process, at least on the military side. So last week, they had the initial public NTSB hearings on it. 3 takeaways that I saw from some of the articles that I looked at. There were concerns about the route. Those had been reiterated from what the helicopter was flying. There were concerns about the workload of the controllers. But perhaps the one that, spoke most to my experience was the military aircraft equipment differences from civilian aircraft. Systems like the radar altimeters, tolerances required for those. Ted Cruz talking potential legislation on the ADS-B, or automatic dependent surveillance broadcasting, so a more precise way to track aircraft. And, I think of other systems then, like reduced vertical minimum separation. And it seems like our aircraft kind of lack implementing some of these technologies that go into the FAA system. So again, I'm not an expert on continuity of government flights, but I do think there's some notable things here, at least, for me on the military equipment differences. But I'm curious on your guys' thoughts and what jumped out to you from the hearings. Boyle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that when you look at aviation mishaps, of the past, a lot of them were mechanically related. Bits failing, engines failing, complete loss of electrical power. The systems now are so good, both on the military and the civilian side, that although none of us have been to safety school for real, none of us are real safety officers. I bet you if you pulled data from the last 15, 20 years of the U.S. military, the vast majority of Class A mishap, Class A being the most expensive and or tragic of mishaps on the military side, that they would be human error. And this was no different. And yes, there are other factors that were part of that, differences in equipment, but when people are off their route and they are off their altitude and don't know what the crew resource management was happening in either cockpit, but when you're off of those things, then things go badly. Just my own experience flying around Tokyo quite a bit in a C-12, lots of helicopter traffic around there, and always made me, I was always, very, very cognizant of, all of the traffic that was flying around, underneath, above these air routes, highly, highly congested. And I'm not disparaging, any of the folks who were affected by the mishap, this particular one, but holy cow, anybody who's flown in and out of Reagan or has just walked around there, you see all the helicopter routes, you see all of the airliners that are coming in to Reagan, but very small margin for error. And the corridors are built to be safe, but unfortunately, when people are off those routes and they're off that altitude, and perhaps not paying attention, or scan breaks down or something, then unfortunately mishaps are going to happen. But the fact that it came out to human error on a couple different pieces of it, to me, was no surprise, honestly.
Gravy, what do you think?
Yeah, just absolute tragedy. So, hearts go out, to everybody that died on that. So I don't want to say anything negative. I've certainly made a lot of assumptions just based on our experience and just kind of what we know. And had a very passionate discussion with my wife. So she got the brunt into that after a few too many scotches, because it is such a tragedy, and it is hard and painful, for us aviators to see civilians hurt in that fashion. I mean, it is just heartbreaking because we take on the mantle of risk, especially single seat aviators, which is a conscious choice for me to be a single seat aviator. And that was because I always felt comfortable taking risk with my own person, right? And having either a Wizzo in the back or a helicopter full of people or a multi-crewed vehicle, I was always just very uncomfortable. So my heart goes out to him. But what I can say, not negatively, is this revealed systemic failures in several different areas, and there's probably blame in a lot of spots, right? There's probably blame in the air crew, right, with the instructor as well as the pilot in command or the one at the controls. Definitely, there's probably blame in instruments. There's probably blame in the routing. There's probably blame in FAA control. I mean, there's probably a lot of systemic failures that were going on there, both at the squadron level as well as on the routing. So I was happy to see that a lot of things kind of came out from this hearing that addressed that systemic risk. And one of the biggest and hardest to solve is the FAA infrastructure of maintaining situational awareness and positive control of people in stuffed airspace. And one of the most terrifying things for me when I started flying the F-35 and the APG-81 was seeing everybody, getting that situational awareness in tight airspace. I know what it was like with you guys because the Hornet radar is better than the Harrier radar in different regimes. But like when I got that essay, I was just like, oh my goodness. We saw things that was like, that is way too close. In a Harrier, I remember I did a right to right with a Huey during WTI that was so close co-altitude. I still remember the boot treads on the door gunner, Boyle. Like,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean it was close and I was hot when I landed. Because again, it was the course rules. People were off altitude, they were off timing, and it was just a close call. I've split a section of Seahawks in the San Diego terminal area, and it wasn't just me. It was five other Harriers behind me trying to land on a boat in between Point Loma and North Island, and you're just sitting here going, oh my goodness. So to hear something like this happen, it's just I have a hard time with it because it is just absolutely heartbreaking. But let me talk about ADSB. So Senator Cruz brought this up. Sounds like a great idea, sounds easy, right? I'm going to tell you that is going to get a lot of pushback from the Pentagon. It has to be a law from Congress mandating the DoD does it because the pushback is going to be out of control because most of the aircraft in the DoD do not have ADSB, and installing that into airframes is going to take decades and lots of money. Now, should it happen? I don't know. I'm not the one that's going to make that determination. Maybe, maybe not. But as a potential mitigator or a control to put on a military aircraft to help in these types of situations, that's one of many courses of action. So, fix the FAA, get them better kit, get them modern computers, get them modern radars, get them modern controllers, get them enough money, get them enough people. Try to kit out military aircraft with better systems and sensors, improve the training, improve the scheduling, improve all those things. So there's just a lot in this one, and it's hard to unpack. And I really want to make sure I'm not saying anything negative here because, man, that is a rough one. And for those of us that have had to have conversations with people that have either crashed airplanes or died as a result of it, uh, it those are hard, like
Hmm.
real hard.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it on a couple fronts, right? Like number one, I always want to respect the process. These are just the initial hearings, right? All of those sources of error, will probably likely manifest in the final out brief, but in the initial ones here, really honing in on that equipment, and you kind of nailed the ADS-B piece, Gravy, because I was thinking about this and wrote down some notes, but like, why does the tech lag on military jets? And just so people know, a lot of times, I mean, the Hornet was developed in the late 70s, right? And we're still flying that today. ADSB was definitely not a requirement when that thing was procured, right? And now, as you said, we talk about, hey, do we need to retrofit it? What's the time left on that platform? What is that going to take, to get that integrated? What does that do, to the performance of the airframe? Can there be any kind of security issues or other things? Like how do you integrate this new system and make sure that everything that's already there is intact and not messed up when you put it on there? You kind of have to do that retrograde testing. So I think it's hard, and I do think we look at the robustness, particularly of the radar altimeters, right? Boyle, I know you probably saw this on a ship where you're taxiing around and maybe you're over a thinner piece of metal and like, is the thing working? Is it not? These things are built to kind of give you a general reference in a robust, frame. They aren't built for the, you know, uh, day-to-day admin flying only, very precise altitude reporting, right? This has to be a rough piece of gear that can sustain multiple Gs, all these other things. So I think at the end of the day, you don't see the same kind of tolerances on some of those pieces of gear as well. So it's a hard problem. Again, I kind of tee it up as a discussion given what we've seen, and Gravy, I think you nailed it there. Is it going to be something that we can retrofit? Is that juice worth a squeeze? Not something we'll solve here today, but something that hopefully some studies can look at and see, hey, what can we do to be plugging into the airspace better there? Any closing thoughts on that one, gentlemen?
I would just say, what is the priority of it? Yes, there might be a call for it now, ADSB and all military aircraft. But I remember, Lenny brought up the point about the Hornet being an old aircraft. And for every year the legacy Hornet has been in existence, every time they list out the top 10 changes that need to happen, number one for decades and decades was a civilian ILS. And this is an airplane that already had the instrumentation inside of it. It had antennas for it, maybe not dialed into the right kinds of frequencies, but at least it could display it in the cockpit already because you do that out at the boat. So these are not big engineering changes to do, and it's still other things took higher priority, despite it being at the top of every OAG year after year, decade after decade with it.
I thought ILS was a life changer in the F-35. That was just like, my goodness, it felt like a hero. And at the time we're getting an ILS, everyone else is doing GPS approaches. We're just kind of laughing how
The
we are
best
And again,
always
that's
thing
another thing.
century
Like
could offer.
certify military certify these aircraft, and it's a costly process, right? It's a lengthy process. I'm sure the aircraft are good enough and they can do it, but are you going to take the time to do that, or are you going to use some of these older legacy style approaches? That's another great example, right? Of why does the technology lag? Is it the cost? Is it necessary? Again, let's get some studies going and see if that helps integrating into these especially congested environments, right? Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I'll move on to topic 3. I'm going to kind of tee this segment up for the first time as well. We're going to call this snapshots. And I like to think of this as like the quad chart of podcasting segments, where I'm going to put up multiple topics and we'll just do them in a little bit shorter period of time here. So MSN, first one here. Let's talk 6th gen fighters briefly. MSN related a National Security Journal article relating how Congress looking to restore some funding for the Navy on a 6th gen fighter, a program which the Pentagon had kind of tabled for now. The administration expressed concerns about the industrial base's ability to produce multiple 6th gen aircraft, with Boeing already on tap for the Air Force's F-47, and Northrop Grumman and Boeing now in the hunt for the Navy's newest fighter. But this week, the Boeing strike started, second strike in a year. So are these kinds of unplanned manufacturing challenges and delays valid for the the things that the administration was envisioning? Or do you guys have any thoughts on this? The ability of the industrial base to do 2 6th gen fighters, and now the one that's on contract striking.
55. That's all I'm going to say on this one. No, I'm joking. Okay, so I'll start. Hey, good on the union boss, right? Like, great timing. That's a good strategic thinker right there. Trying to squeeze a few extra bucks out. I don't know the particulars of the union strike and why and what the grievances are. We just kind of see the headlines of that it is happening, and it is not at an opportune time when we're trying to do some work on a 6th generation aircraft. The Chinese are clearly in development. They are clearly flying. We have seen several copies in the air over in China. Always grainy photos, always delta wingish, always lacking tails, very much like the one we're envisioning. So it doesn't seem opportune. But at the same time, like, that's our system. Like, this is our system for right and for wrong. This is how our system developed with the defense industrial base, and unions developed for a reason as well. You know, I'm not going to make any comments on whether or not it's outmoded or not. Maybe not. That's over to Boeing and their workers to figure that out. But, with the right, pressures, anything can be overcome, whether that's going to come from the administration, whether it's going to come from Boeing, DoD, wherever. It doesn't really matter. So I just kind of take this as a matter of course of our system. Can the industry handle it? Yeah, it always has, and it will in the future. Is it perfect? Nope, not even close. Is it expensive? Yep, sure is, right? But at the same time, it's a competitive market. If Boeing can't handle it, what do you want to bet? SecDef's phone is ringing off the hook from, James Takelet, and NG and like everybody else out there that has an offering as well, saying, guess what? We don't have. We don't have a strike. We've got this great fighter. So the market is also going to address it. And so I don't have any insider information on this one other than just watching what's happening and going, yikes. Like, I hope it gets solved soon. Like, that's about it for me.
What do you think?
I think it will get solved, and we will always deal with labor challenges, whether it be labor shortages or union workers striking. Even during the Second World War, the United States had to deal with this. In 1943, there was a big coal strike in the spring and summer of '43, and it had ripple effects across the entire industrial base. I mean, that was one of the prime sources of fuel for electricity in the United States, which impacted every factory, every train, everything like that was moving out of factories in the U.S. Overseas, in Australia, there were several times that the Australian stevedores went on strike, for better wages, better treatment, better labor thing. And that is one of the benefits of being in a democracy, is that workers get to do those things and have their voices heard, and now they get come to the table with their management, with company leadership, and they address those concerns. So we're always going to deal with this. Is this an opportune time? No, it's it all will always come at maybe the worst time or the most opportune time, like Gravy brought up with that union leader. But that is one of the benefits of democracy, and I choose to see it as a benefit. But we will always deal with it. I don't think we need to spend too much time worrying about it. It will always be there, but it'll get solved, and then we'll be able to move on.
Awesome. Well, we'll be following what happens with Navy, 6th-gen fighters, potential awards. What about the Marine Corps? How are we doing looking at 6th-gen fighters? I think that's
We're not. So publicly stated, from the Deputy Commandant for Aviation, that we are going to be a 5th-generation force, and that's what we are going to do, right? And I think it's smart. I think it's wise. I think it's affordable. I think it's the best bang for the buck for the American dollar, and it keeps the Marine Corps in a prime position, right, to lead in that way, and then fast follow if we can fast follow, right? If there's a 6th-generation option out there for us, yeah, great. Maybe fast follow at a later date, but we certainly do not have the funding or the mission to say, yeah, we're going to be America's frontline air dominant 6th-generation force.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we do. And I'm pretty pumped at what the Marine Corps is doing now with the 5th-gen and the capabilities that they're going to bring, and the additional capabilities they're bringing on with the 5th-gen to fly with it, via man-to-man teaming and stuff like that. It is going to be highly lethal. Not F-47, not F-55, which is a PowerPoint slide at this point, I believe. But it's going to be lethal. It's going to be good.
But they are investing in a 2nd-generation pull-up bar, which will yell at you instead of having a sergeant do that. So Marine Corps is taking advantage of new technology and AI that's out there.
Just gonna do like one. Remember that?
Elbows did not lock out. Yep.
Remember that ops sergeant that would just
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh
He'd do
man.
like 25 and he'd count 15. You're like, come
Yeah.
on, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep. I would always be in the back and not go to that line. That was my technique to avoid that.
Well, you wait. You got to hang back and like watch the guy that's being
Yes.
the generous dude, and then that line is like 80 people deep, right?
Yeah. Yep. Oh man. Some more flashbacks. It's good to be on the other side now, right? All right. Snapshot 2. USNI did report last week an F-35C crash near NAS Lemoore, California. Thankfully, the pilot did eject safely. I think it's too soon to speculate. I think we need to respect that process there. The plane does have an excellent safety record. According to Aerospace Global News, it estimates about 1.6 crashes per 100,000 flight hours. That looked to be about half of some of the 4th-gen forebears that I could see there. Any thoughts or any interesting things you guys read on this one, or that you want to say about the process, the military mishap process?
Well, you first, man.
Yeah, nothing to comment in particular about this. The process is what it is, and it is purposely slow so people don't jump to unnecessary conclusions. They are very methodical. I really like the way that it is fenced off from any commander or outside pressure, and I've always respected how commanders and maybe hires up, even if there is outside political pressure being put on a particular service about, hey, you need to wrap this one up, that nope, the process is sacrosanct. And although slow and painful, and was my really one big complaint about Top Gun 2, when people ask me, they're like, what was unrealistic? I'm like, well, the mishap that happened and the jet gives the bird strike. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that totally happens. Like, that could totally happen. They're like, oh, well, what was wrong? I'm like, they were like flying 2 days later. That would never happen. You know how slow a safety board is? Like 2 days just to get it assembled and then gather all the data and then go out to the field and pull the black button. Like, nah, that was the most unrealistic thing in that movie.
Yeah.
Valid gravy.
Yeah.
I mean, Lenny, you were there with us at WTI when the F-35B collided with the C-130. That was one of my jets. Yeah, yeah. So my squadron was supporting the course. We flew in from Japan to support the course in Yuma, and so it was my jet. It was not my pilot. It was a student, and just going through that process after that collision where an F-35 impacted a C-130, and thanks be to God, everybody survived. And there was minimal property damage outside of military gear. But from the first call, that first radio call that came into the ready room to finally getting through that mishap board, I went from I went through the whole wheel, man. Like I went through the whole wheel of understanding of what was happening and what did happen to that aviator and to the situation in aircraft. So you cannot prejudge, right? So we were talking about the helicopter crash, like from pilots, we've flown on the goggles, we've flown the level, we've flown in, that type of airspace. We are not a multi-crewed aircraft. We are not flying at those airspeeds. Like we we make all of these assumptions and we decide that we know what happened, and then a few bros go online and they start talking about it, but no one actually knows, right? So the mishap process is protected, kind of paralegally protected. It's a privileged investigation, which keeps people open to talking about what happened, knowing that they will not be, held responsible necessarily, because the investigation is about understanding what happened to learn from it and not do that again in the future, right? And like we say, the NATOPS is written in blood, right? And that blood goes on to saving future lives, and the mishap process protects that. So it's a pretty amazing process. Now, what people are like, well, what about being held liable if you mess something up or someone got hurt? Well, there's a separate process that runs parallel to the mishap process, and that separate process is run under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and that is an investigation for wrongdoing, right, underneath the UCMJ if there is an article violation there, right? So two separate processes. One is privileged and purely for safety investigation and understanding what happened, and the other is for criminal liability under the UCMJ. Okay, so I think that's an important note for everybody to understand, and it kind of helps us learn, and then it also helps us hold responsibility when we need, if there was a dereliction of duty or if there was an article violation of the UCMJ. So two separate things. I've got no judgment on what happened. I don't want to judge what happened. But I'm sure it'll come out, and it'll start making the rounds in the bro circles here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think you guys kind of covered it, and just a few more specifics, right? Like, if you're a pilot in this process, they're going back. Your training jacket gets reviewed all the way back to day one, right? Your medical history, right? Everything. Your history immediately leading up to the incident, right? And that is a lengthy process, right? With physicians and instructors and all these kinds of things and interviews that need to happen, right? So, and then the same thing's done on the aircraft side, right? That aircraft dissected maintenance wise, all the way back to see if there were trends with issues. The maintainers that were working on that aircraft, right? So, and then you assemble this mountain of data, right? that has to then get parsed and filtered and conclusions and results reviewed, and then a report written and vetted, right? So, that's why this thing takes 6 months plus, usually on the order of, potentially a year to finally get out and hit the streets. So, yeah, I'll always try to respect that process as best as possible. And like you said, thankfully, pilot got out in this case. Awesome. All right. Well, a little bit on the lighter side here. We've got a bonus topic of
Finally.
Snapshot 3. FY 25 to 26 Marine Corps Aviation bonus. I saw this on LinkedIn the other day, this real fancy graphic. I sent it to you guys. Maybe Base can flash this up in the editing. But wow.
Yeah.
Guys, were you on the bonus? Did you take it then? Would you take it now? Gravy, let's start with you.
Was never on the bonus. In fact, I was exactly right for wrong. So the year I was eligible for it, they stopped giving Harrier guys bonuses. And I picked up F-35, and they're like, well, you picked up F-35, I'm going to give you a bonus for that. And then the year I was then again eligible, like by timing, I would have been eligible. They started giving it like the year after. So like I exactly threaded the no bonus needle
Well
for Marine
done.
Corps aviators. So I quite literally and actually was in the Marine Corps because I loved being there. which is, shocking. So guys would complain about it. And I told them, I'm like, well, it worked, dude. Like they didn't need to spend the bonus on you. You're here. Like understand what the bonus is for. Like if they didn't need to spend it and you're here, that was a wise choice. So I'm not going to say the dudes flying now are somehow lesser humans, but hey, the bonus is available and they grab it, man, good on them. I'm just going to not give them any financial advice, but give me a call, anytime. Like I've got a podcast they can invest in for just a few Bitcoin if they want to. We'll talk about them and say nice things.
Boyle, what about you? You look like a bonus guy.
I did, but it was the
Yeah.
last year, and like Gravy, I was in it for Queen and Country, love of the core, and to me they could have given a bonus of like $1, and I would have taken it and been like suckers. I was staying around anyway. But it was the last year that they gave a fixed wing bonus, and this I think it was in '06, but it was
Yeah.
only a 3-year payout. You owed, I think, 6 years. And it was only for, I think it was like 18 grand. And then after taxes, you got like 12.5 or something like that. And then the next year, it it went almost to nothing. I think there was like maybe 5 grand for 3 years for fixed wing, but rotary wing went up. And so when you sent this image out, Lenny, what I was most curious about was, okay, who are they paying more and for how long? Which speaks to, it's a lagging indicator. At the time, rotary wing folks were just really, multiple deployments out to the desert, Iraq, Afghanistan. If you were a Cat 1 going into your rotary wing squadron, you were doing 3-4 pumps, less than 1-to-1 dwell. And that's why the fixed wing one went like way down to 0, to unfortunately for Gravy. But then all of a sudden there was this huge rotary wing one because they wanted to keep rotary wing folks around. So with this one, I found it interesting that the V-22 folks, there's a transition there. Like if you look at it, for the long termers, they want to keep V-22 folks around, but at some point they're like, nah, you're not worth as much. For what, and it's the retention, but it's a lagging indicator. I think, the bonuses are, but
Yeah.
What about you, Lenny?
Yeah, it always seems reactionary. And, it'd be great if we got predictive with it. Like, now we're in the lull for this. This is going to be the community that's short next. We should lead turn it by a year and offer this bonus sooner rather than later. I hope they're getting to that kind of predictive nature of things. Never got it. Always ineligible. Certainly would have taken it, but I was probably staying in to do 20 as long as it worked for me and worked for the then family. So yeah, I knew I wanted to continue on and always kind of give it a shot, get to that military retirement anyway. But if there was an opportunity to take 200K plus, even if taxes shaved some of that off, yeah, I think I would have taken it.
Heck yeah.
It's interesting. Obviously, the point of this is, manpower retention. And it's interesting to see how some of the other services do it too, right? Like the Air Force. I was working with a lot of those guys, and they were doing it in smaller chunks, like, hey, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, just like this shorter 1 year signing deal. And it was almost like guys would be like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll stay in for another. And like they kind of dangled the carrot around the time that folks were looking to maybe get out, into their contract, go to the reserves, start doing airlines and things like that. And if you kind of swayed them at that right inflection point in time with some extra money, I think it was effective for those guys. But yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of studies out there. Again, I need my PhD level brain there in -3 or my SAW graduate in -2 to tell me, like, do bonuses even work? Are people
That
staying
was
in
gonna be my
anyway?
question.
And is
Does
the
it
money
work?
valid?
Yeah.
I think I've heard, I cannot assign this to actually any human, so consider this like conjecture, but I believe I've heard people say that they have the data that money does equal people staying in. You always got to ask yourself, like, the people that stay in for the money, are those the people you want in flying your airplanes? We people, you incentivize aviators, aggressive type A, risk takers with flight time and great leadership and great squadron environments and career pathways that help them meet their life goals. If one of their life goals is to get 340K for an 8 year, sure, you've met that life goal and they're in, right? But it's really hard because you got to incentivize equally and fairly an entire cohort of aviators across type model series for different reasons, and they're all individual humans with their own individual standards of what quality of life actually is. So yeah, so the money grabs the people that want the money. The people that were already going to stay in, hey, congratulations! Now you got a big fat check. Invest it wisely, please. And so, like, I think it's a, in the end, it's a good thing. If you got the money, go for it. But people make their own decisions. But ultimately, a lot of guys in our time frame stayed even when the wars were going down and we weren't deploying as much, which we all love to do, and we loved going to the boat, and we loved flying fighters, and we loved doing things like that. And as always, we still stayed in because I think ultimately, I mean, I can speak for me, not you guys. Like, I had wonderful leadership. I had incredible, amazing leadership, and the Marine Corps kept on putting opportunities in front of me that motivated me to stay and keep going in the Marine Corps. Right. So if they could figure that out, like, man, or if they like go buy an AI robot to figure that out or whatever it is, like, I hope they do.
Yeah, and I'm curious if it's a climate thing, right? Like, hey, we think these people are staying anyway. They'll be happier. They won't be looking over the fence. Will they be diving in a little more engaged, feeling a little more appreciated? But do we think that they're staying in anyway? And you try to offer them some kind of incentive pay that makes it more comparable to if they got out, and are they therefore happier in the grind that it can sometimes be in an active duty fleet squadron? So I don't know. I'd have to look at those studies. Boyle, any
Super
closing
hard
thoughts on
problem.
that topic?
Yeah, I got one last thought about bonuses. The question I ask is, why are you offering a bonus? What is the reason you are offering a bonus? Is it to fill in cockpits? That's some of it. But if you look at where people are in their career, when you can first take this at the 12-year mark, right, or just shy of your 12-year mark, you've probably got 1, 2 fleet tours already done. Maybe you're knocking on department head, and now they're going to get you for 8 years. That is so that staffing billets can be filled by aviators. That is not for butts in cockpits. Same with, here at the end of the chart, I'm looking at it right now, if you're at, 14, 15 or 16 years, they'll give you 14 to 15 years, they'll give you a 4-year bonus. That is not to keep you in a cockpit. 100%. There, you've either made command or you haven't, and that is 100% to keep staff billets filled. Not
But there's so many gotchas. We call it the devil's money
Yeah,
because, like,
that's
oh, that
right.
means they've got you. But you go to school, you owe 2 years on the backside.
Yeah,
Now, if you get command, you owe 2 years on the backside. So a lot that bonus runs concurrent with all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, you're like, are you really applying the money wisely here? I don't know. And we're in a year where recruiting is through the roof. There's a lot of really positive energy across all the services right now, and the airlines are having a tough time, and they're starting to kind of have a tough time. And robots are about to start flying airlines in the next few years, or go down to single pilot, or whatever the Airline Pilots Association, negotiates with the FAA and everybody else, right? So it's like we're it might be exactly right for wrong. I don't know, but to me, I'm kind of curious about it. I don't want to say it's a waste of money, but certainly, like, the aviators grabbing that thing, man, good on them. Congratulations. Please do not blow it on like a new, supercar or something. Like, don't do that. Invest, please. Be smart.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it for snapshots. All right. Now, getting into our beginning of the end here, gravy. This day or week in history. What'd you pull for us off
Put on
your
your seatbelts,
bookshelf in the
boys.
back there?
Put on your seatbelts. We are about to round the second hour of the Ready Room, Cowboy Time. Okay. This is not a 121 second to stay in history. This is a lecture. I just want you to know that.
okay,
So,
ready.
Boyle, I'm asking you, Dr. Lewis, um, what happened on 8 August 1942?
Put on my
Yeah, there you
doctoral
go.
hat.
There you go.
What happened on 8 August 1942?
I brought props too.
Something
Okay.
very significant and important.
Yes.
You're going to tell
Yes.
us about.
Okay. Okay. This was the day after 7 August 1942, which was the invasion of Guadalcanal.
Yes.
Boom. Okay,
Boom.
so my nerd bookshelf behind me is like half empty because I rated the saw stuff, man. Okay, so Here we go. We went through a lot for this one. So this is Esposito's West Point Atlas of the Pacific Campaign.
Yeah.
Great write-up on Guadalcanal. For primary sources, stuff by Morrison, anything by Morrison, his histories, his naval histories. So in this one is a condensed version. This is Two Ocean War.
Yep.
Great write-up on Guadalcanal and everything the Navy did. Of course, if you do not have your own copy of the Marine Corps history of World War II, you need one, because this volume right here, A History of the Marine Corps Operations in World War II, this is Pearl Harbor to Guadalcanal. This will tell you everything that the government wants you to know. And okay, so lighter reading, Ian Toll's trilogy, the second one, The Conquering Tide,
Brilliant.
fantastic. Please read this. I read it a while ago and I got to read it again. And then for our Navy bros, of course, Hornfisher and Neptune's Inferno for the naval campaign. So a lot of books on this, a lot of write-ups on this, a lot of really awesome things. And yeah, there it is, man. So
Guadalcanal
this,
Diary. Yep.
so I mean, a lot of our squadron's histories began here. Like this began the legends that we were led to believe as young lieutenants and captains, and all of our heroes, that we admire. So the 7 August, actually, so I wanted to go to the kind of the overall campaign just real quick, like why Guadalcanal? Giant argument inside of the War Department in between like the heavies, it was Admiral King, and then Marshall, and then of course Nimitz in the Pacific, and then MacArthur, out in the Philippines or out in Australia. So there was like all of these arguments on how in the world we're going to tackle this problem, and there was a lot of tension on which way they should go and like how we should generally attack this thing. And what they kind of came up with was a two wave, or a double advance, one that's kind of going to run through Australia up into the Philippines and eventually onto the mainland, and then the other one that was going to run beginning in the Southern Solomons and work their way up the islands, the famous island campaign. Well, kind of tit for tat, a lot of four-star fighting back and forth, while King ended up winning this argument by going to the Lower Solomons and getting Gormley and crew to go into Guadalcanal. Big surprise on the Japanese, lightly defended. They were building an air base there, and that air base, if they'd finished it, was going to be able to range a lot of different activities that the Allies were, in the middle of doing. Right. So I'm just going to try to keep this high level and not like Dr. Lewis level of detail. So that's why they went in. So they grabbed Vandegrift. Like they had no time. It was like on a shoestring. They were like stealing ships from this place, stealing stuff from that place. They put all this stuff together, and like quickly were like, go get Guadalcanal. So they approached from the south and the west. They kind of came around, went through Savo, uh, went around Savo, and then there were like a couple of islands they had to hit. The first island was up north. They hit that one. Was that, I'm going to lose the name real quick without referencing it. You
Oh
remember?
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about,
Not
Grady.
Florida, not Florida, not Florida. Anyway, I'll remember in a second. So they hit the island and they turn around and they come south and they take Guadalcanal. And in the space of about a day and a half, they take the beachhead and then they take the airfield. So on 8 August, they take the airfield that afternoon. Well, big surprise, the Japanese weren't going to let them take this, lightly. So they come in and basically have a surprise attack. And then some of the like battles of naval lore are fought there. The Battle of Iron Bottom Sound, I believe, is the nickname. End up running off the Navy, right? Just like get out of here. And because the Navy had to protect itself, they couldn't lose those assets or they would never be able to come back and resupply. So they pull this thing off and they end up the Marines outlast the barrages, everything else, and then squadrons start arriving. And the first squadron there, bonus points if you know, VMF 223, the Great American Bulldogs, show up when they're F4F Wildcats. So I wore my VMF 121, didn't get there till the October's time frame. So I got my 121, shirt on, in honor of it, my Cactus Air Force koozie, my frosty beverage ready to go. And so they operated on this airfield under constant bombardment and harassment by the Japanese and, not getting a lot of supplies from the Navy. And they are taking hits at night. They are rebuilding the airplanes, servicing them and launching them again to provide air cover for the Marines that are still doing the fighting. So, really amazing. Heroes were made, just like an incredible, in the end, it was a huge risk by King to go after this thing. It could have gone really sideways, and it almost did several times. But the American fighting spirit won out, and they ended up turning that Guadalcanal airfield into a very strategic base that was able to then go out and you know support Marines doing their island campaign all the way up. So turned out to be a pretty big success in the end, but great one. Love talking about it, and there's just so many good books to read on it. It's an overwhelming amount of information on this battle, and Marines kind of hang our hat on it, as Marine aviators. So squadrons that were there: 223, 224, 121, 212. A bunch of SPD squadrons ended up showing up. A bunch of Navy squadrons showed up, and then even some Air Force squadrons showed up. With their P-39s, and eventually bomber groups came in as well. B-17s, B-25s, B-26s, those types of things. So pretty amazing, man. Like when I started looking up this date, I was like, "Why is this date familiar? Why?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, crap." And then it was like a panic scan trying to read all my books to remember what the flow was. But man, we've got binders and binders of notes on this thing. This is just really, really, really great day in history for marine aviation. Here endeth the lecture.
Love it.
Awesome. Boyle, any thoughts?
No,
Dr.
just
Lewis.
anytime you're talking to a one of our shipmate brothers and sisters, it's always good to bring up the fact that, like, if you're helping them, like, don't worry, I'm not going to abandon you like Admiral Fisher did at Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
Love bringing that up, especially to like Roger. Like that's one of my favorite things to do.
Awesome. That's probably why he wasn't here today. He knew the date. He knew the jokes were
Yeah,
coming.
shame.
And
Coming
he's like,
clear.
you know what? I need to
Clear.
tap Rob in for this
Yeah.
history day because they're going to get me.
Well, yeah, a lot of really great stuff from the naval campaigns happened there too, with like destroyer, commander quality, naval gunnery, night gunnery, radar use with the ships. I mean, some like eh, winning a war is more about what you learn in the execution of that war and less about what you show up with, right? You show up as prepared as you can be, but no one is ever actually prepared for the war they fight. And as we spend all of our lives preparing for the next war, I think we should recognize that we're probably going to get it mostly wrong, and we're going to have to learn very quickly and adapt and win. That's basically it. So this is a great great example of just like tenacity of Marines on the ground, holding that airfield, and then those airmen fixing airplanes. Man, I wish I could show you the painting I got of the 121 guys doing it. It's just gorgeous watching those Marines just like getting after it, man. So good. And then ultimately it turned out.
Awesome. Well, great
one,
job.
Gary. Great job.
Yes, excellent job. All right, gentlemen, well, we're coming down to the end. Any reattacks from today? Anything you want to correct yourself on there? -2 gravy.
I'm pretty sure we've established that we don't ever do any wrong, except like, when we do our root cause analysis in every flight we've ever done, like we will do endless analysis of what the root cause of the error was, right? And so we talked about India and Pakistan. We talked about, the helicopter incident. We talked about the F-35C, right? It always comes down to like the same root cause, and that's just do better, right? And almost every single time, so like on this podcast, my root cause analysis, after 25,000 views and 800 plus comments is, hey, do better, right? Like that's pretty much it. So there you go. That's my reattack. That's my lesson learned for the day.
Well, nice work on the history segment. You're doing better.
You suck, but that was good.
I appreciate you. Boyle, any reattacks for you from today?
No, tremendous history lesson. Wonderful, Gravy. Thank you. And they just want to double down, thanks to the guy who wrote the comment about how amazing we are and that we deserve our
anchor on that.
Yeah, I'm going to anchor on that. That's how
yeah.
You never end on the other. You end with the goods, right?
Yeah,
like
good, bad, good
others in the debrief, and you always try and end on something positive, even if it's like, great job finding your aircraft out on the line today. Even if that was it. Yeah.
What's my favorite when you're bagging on somebody that's not there? You're like terrible pilot, man, but great bar act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Well, nice job. I would ask Space if there are any fines. I have it on my little checklist here, but I doubt Rob knows what they are. So, I wish I said whatever I wanted today, from the fine list, because I wouldn't have been called out. But anybody got any fines that they want to call us out on?
No, I don't think
so.
All
right. Well, with nothing else.
I think we're good. Yeah, man.
All right. Well, again, thanks to Authentic Media. You guys can find us on Patreon, Apple, Spotify. You can chat us at Authentic Media or on X at Ready Room Cowboy Time. And guys, I hear those footsteps. Exo's coming.
Damn
You guys
XO.
can get back to work. I'm going to
Back to
drive to
work.
the grocery store.
Yeah, go to the grocery store. I'm going to get back to work.
Thanks for the time today. We'll see you
Makes
next
sense.
time.